You're listening to the Fezcast, the Saracens fans podcast bringing you the independent and unhinged views of the voices in our heads, as well as those of our special guests. To get in touch with us, find the Fezcast on social media and listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube and more. Thanks for tuning in and enjoy this week's show.
You're listening to the Fezcast.
Well, welcome everybody. We've got a cornucopia of riches here tonight in the form of myself, of course, Barry, Jez and Alex. So welcome all. Barry, you've been in enemy country until this afternoon. Is it Devon in January high up on your list of attractive places to go to?
Well, it was pretty wet, but you can take that in whichever way you like, really. But an amazing clap of thunder at 4:30 this morning, which shook the hotel I was staying in. But apparently, it wasn't an invasion.
The earth moved, did it?
Absolutely.
I call it enemy territory. I've been to Exeter many times and caught the bus out from the town out to the grounds, packed full of Exeter supporters with my Saracens shirt on, and they're actually a very friendly mob. It's really only Mr. Baxter and Toadface who are completely beyond the pale down there, I found.
I think if you slip them, if you go and give them a high 6, they seem to be all right, don't they?
All I can really say is everyone we spoke to inside the ground on the way and in the pubs afterwards was very good to us. So
yeah, they are generally. But we'll come back to the men's game later because we'll start off by concentrating on the women's game. And Alex, absolutely huge results at the weekend. Bristol getting beaten, Exeter getting beaten, and us having a 5-point win over Harlequins. Couldn't really have gone better, could it?
Yeah, it was great. It does make me a bit nervous to go to Ealing this week because I'm less confident that we'll beat them, but I think we can do it. I think we were just in control for most of the game. We didn't get loads and loads of tries, but it was a good margin in the end. And yeah, we just didn't really let them have the ball.
Yeah, we'll come back to that because it really was a good performance, and we're putting together a string of good performances now. But all of a sudden, we get a 5-point win over Exeter. All of the other top teams have got to play each other, so someone's going to drop points. So, touch wood, fingers crossed, everything you want. That top 2 place is looking more and more possible.
Well, I think for definite, the important thing is momentum, isn't it? And we talked about it enough times in the Fezcast over the years. When you get on a roll of momentum, then it makes a huge amount of difference. And I think what's interesting, I don't know whether you agree with me here, Alex, as well, is that ever since the loss against Loughborough, pressure seems to have come off the team a little bit, and they're playing with a bit more freedom in so much as that they can perhaps say, OK, we've had our bad result, let's knuckle down a little bit, but, we've made it difficult for ourselves, well, let's take the pressure off and just play some great rugby, which they have done.
Yeah, I think that any kind of space we had to drop points, we lost that against Loughborough. So they just know that if we don't get the points, then there's a chance of not getting top 2 and maybe even not getting a semi-final. So that importance has really ramped up in these last few games, and they just seem to be playing some great rugby.
What it seems to me, and it's interesting to draw parallels with the men's team, because that game yesterday was almost completely error-free by Saracens, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think in the last 20 minutes we started to make some more errors, so maybe we need to look at that with our substitutes coming on. But apart from that, it was really good.
But it is interesting to speculate exactly what. Is it Alex Oxterbury? What has been done? Because going back to the game against Quins, albeit it played in a blowing gale, we were making loads of mistakes and there were many games where we were. And suddenly we've really tightened it up and it makes all the difference, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I think some of that will just be cohesion as a squad and having more time together. When we played Quins, there wasn't that much between WXV and Quins. listen, lots of players hadn't really trained with the squad, especially some of the newer players coming in. So I think partly it's just having time together as a squad as an uninterrupted block where everyone can just gel together, and it seems to work well for us.
That's a really good point. That it hadn't occurred to me that, but of course, the more they go on, the more we get away from the disruption of the World Cup and all of that, or what was happening before. But Jez, one thing that was great to see, and again, in comparison to the men's team, were the kind of running lines that, for instance, Lottie Sharp was running. It was the kind of
Yeah.
inventive, fast running back play that we're aching to see the men do.
Well, it's not difficult, is it? And I mean, it's what we talked about last week in relation to the reaction to the loss against Castro. You want players coming from deep, and we'll talk about this when we talk about the men's game against Chiefs, because I think there was that development in the men's game. But yeah, you're right. Watch what the women were doing. The runs were coming not only from deep, but there were options. So if you were the pivot player, whether that be a standoff or scrum half, you had options either side of you. And I mean, I remember going back to being coached when I first started playing the game, and when I coached the game. What you want is you want options, and you want options coming from different directions, but more importantly, you want them coming at pace and with determination. And you got that from the women, full stop. I mean, you saw some absolutely amazing bursts from forwards and backs going through gaps that they created because they were coming from depth and because they had put doubt in other players' minds because there were other options. Defenders didn't know whether to go this way or that way. And I mean, if you're doing the blitz defence like a lot of teams are doing, if there's a bit of doubt in your mind, it puts you on your back foot straight away. And Quins, who've got a good defence, they seem to not know at points in that game where the rapier move was coming from.
That fourth try, though, I think sums up everything you're saying. I mean, is there going to be a better try this season than that fourth try, which was coast to coast, wasn't it? Practically from our line, passing through the hands, left, right, and centre, and then over at the other end. Alex, have you seen a better try than that?
I don't think so. I think it was a team try. Very much everyone seemed to get their hands on the ball, and we just kept working out. I think Ellie Corrigan beating Ellie Kuldan helped to start that, and once we'd broken through the defensive line, Quinn just couldn't seem to get their defence back quick enough to reset every time we kept going.
Yeah, Ellie Kelly, it's going to be good when England play to be able to support a team that she plays in, because she is an exciting player to watch. But actually, we coped with her pretty well, didn't we?
Yeah, and I think, Quinn's always needed her try to kind of get on a bit, and I guess luckily for us that didn't happen until almost half time. But yeah, she seems to have kind of been what the Quins team have built themselves around, and we managed to keep the threat contained quite well.
I mean, I mentioned Lottie Clapp had a fantastic game. Poppy Cleal as well was right at her best, I thought, like a sledgehammer.
Yeah, and I think, it seems that not being in the England squad has just made her play even better and kind of renewed the fire in her to kind of keep putting her hand up. And how John Mitchell can keep ignoring her, I don't know.
No, that's right. And I wonder whether the World Cup is driving her on, because she was fit, wasn't she? She played the whole game. She was up with the play all the time. And as I say, was smashing them to pieces, Jez.
Oh, yeah. And I think, to go back to what Alex has said there about the World Cup and everything, I think, at the end of the day, there are very, very good back row players in the England setup. It's not Poppy Cleal is a great player. We know that, but she's not got a God-given right to be in that side. But what she is doing, and which is great to see, because I'm not sure whether she's had that same commitment in the past, perhaps when things haven't gone her way. At the moment, she's sat there saying, well, look, if you're not going to pick me, you're not going to pick me, John. But I'm going to make it in the same way as Tom Willis has done to Steve Borthwick. I'm going to make that decision very, very difficult for you. And, all credit to Poppy for rolling her sleeves up and digging in and getting on with that.
Absolutely. And the other stand-up player for me was the Amelia McDougall. I mean, we lost Zoe Harrison. We talked about it last week. She got clobbered in the last game. But I didn't feel she apart from perhaps the kicks at goal, the conversion she didn't get, she didn't put her foot wrong.
But I think she organised the team really well, both defensively and in attack, which I think shows the experience she's gained in the last couple of years.
It's really not a problem when Zoe Harrison isn't there, is it?
No, I mean you do rely somewhat on your forwards giving, rolling out the armchair and lighting up the cigar and handing over the glass of brandy, and without wishing to dismiss her performance. If you get an armchair ride, it's all well and good, but you still then, when you've got that armchair ride, you've got to exploit the opportunities you're given. And I think that's what she did brilliantly. It wasn't a case of that she was able to float through the game. She took the platform she got and drove the team from it, and was able to bring players on at huge pace, incisively, looked at the right pass at the right time, whether that be a short pop or a longer, a more expansive pass. She picked the right pass or the right kick from hand at the right time. And for a young kid, and let's not forget, she is still only a young kid. I mean, I think she's only a teenager still now. I mean, that's exceptional maturity to be shown on the pitch, and that's great. And going back to me playing as a forward, that's what you want to see. If you've got a platform, you then want to see your backs coming past you, so it's easier to get into support as opposed to running backwards, which perhaps the men have had the problem in the recent weeks. They weren't, because they created a platform. Your 10 supplied the ball to somebody who's coming on at pace, and then the supports run you need to make is all in front of you. The play's all in front of you, and as a forward, that's all you want from your backs on the pitch.
Alex, was there anybody else we haven't mentioned who really caught your eye? I mean, I know they were all good, but was there anyone in particular who stood out?
I think Rosie Gallagher stood out in her defensive efforts. She was constantly there at each arc, trying to counter arc, making the tackles, and just defensively, she was really strong, which was important because Quins are a good team, and if we let them break the line, then they are likely to score.
She really was everywhere, wasn't she? I mean, she's not hard. She's hard to miss because of that long flowing blonde hair and the size of her, but she was everywhere, shoring up the defence, as you say, and taking part in the attacks. Jez?
I think she does a very similar role to what Maro Itoje does in particularly the lineouts, in that she is a physical specimen at that level. I mean, she's got the height, which is more obvious when it's the women because of the not the uniform, but the less of a difference in the physicality between players. Someone like that who disrupted a line out, and Quins lineouts worked pretty well this season, but the lineout, they had some problems, and a lot of that was down to just Rosie Gallagher being there, being put in the air, messing things up. Even if they didn't win the ball, they messed things up, and then a big paw would come over the top or whatever. She had a really, really spectacularly good game.
Absolutely. Now, the cameras were pointed at the empty, not on sale East Stand at Quins, but the commentators were talking a lot about how full the West Stand was. Alex, was that mainly Quins fans, or was there a good turnout of Saris?
There was a good turnout of Saracens fans. There was also quite a lot of players who weren't playing. Marley Packer, Jess Breach, Zoe Harrison, Leanne Infante was there as well. So I think there was a good turnout of Saracens fans. There were a lot of Quins fans as well, but yeah, definitely quite a few Saracens fans.
Yeah, home or away, this derby is really getting everybody's imagination and pulling in the big crowd for a women's game, which is great to see, isn't it? It's great. It's great to see a big crowd and a good atmosphere.
Yeah, and I think it's important going into the World Cup that we kind of generate the engagement around the club games as well, because it's all good saying we're going to have these big attendances for the World Cup. Then it's about what happens after that. How do we sustain their interest?
Absolutely. And that's why it's important that Saracens have some star players in the England team for the World Cup, because hopefully the eyeballs will be on it, and then people will want to go and see those players play for their clubs. I mean, you mentioned, looking forward to next week, we go to Ealing Trailfinders, and you mentioned that is now a tricky tie, isn't it? Who did they beat? They beat Bristol, wasn't it, over the weekend, Ealing?
Yeah, I think that might have done us some favours, because I think if they'd lost closely to Gloucester and then lost closely to Bristol, they'd definitely be playing with a chip on their shoulder and they'd want to beat a top four team. Whereas maybe now they're going to slightly get overconfident and think, okay, we can do this and we can take advantage of that. But it's definitely a tough and physical game, but hopefully it'll set us up well for Exeter.
Hope so, and hopefully there's no danger of us getting complacent. It doesn't seem like it. You know, they seem to be on a roll, to have the momentum and be really determined to do it. And if we can get another 5 points next week, it really does start to become exciting.
Well, it does, in particular, just looking at the league, I think, you know, we're 2 points behind Quins in second and 5 points behind Gloucester Hartpury. You would expect Gloucester perhaps to be league leaders now. They've got enough of a gap there and do look very, very good. But yeah, that second place is really up for grabs, isn't it? And, you know, a couple of good wins now. One, you know, you could put Chiefs out, considering how far Chiefs were ahead at one point this season. They seem to have had a fall off. And I mean, that was a big loss for them at home, really, you know. So it'll be interesting to see how they bounce back. Given that at some point they're going to be playing us, obviously, as well, which is going to be a huge, huge game. But yeah,
let's hope that they carry on playing in a way that gives old Toadface a reason to look even uglier than he is.
Well, obviously, yeah. He speaks so highly of you, though, Duncan.
Well, if he does, I don't hear it. I'm one heck of a lot better looking than he is, and I'll always have that, I think. So I think we'll leave it there. We'll take a short break. Matt is editing this week, which doesn't mean I'm about to go into a string of very naughty words to give him more work to do, but we'll be back chatting about the men.
You're listening to the Fezcast.
You are listening to the Fezcast, which is proudly sponsored by the Saracens Supporters Association, and I'm Alison Davis, one of the SSA committee. For a £10 annual subscription, the SSA provides our members with monthly newsletters, virtual and in-person player events, away match ticket allocations, and we organise pre-match gatherings at away matches. We sponsor men's and women's players, and we support the Saracens Foundation Track Club on behalf of our members. On top of all that, every year we have a seasonal SSA badge, which is exclusive to members. Where else can you get that much value for a tenner? Join now at membermojo.co.uk/SSA, or come and see us on match day in the Oasis at the Stonex.
This is the Fezcast.
So we're back talking about the men. Alex has left us because she was at Harlequins while the men's game was taking place, and she hasn't had a chance to watch it on catch up. So that's fine. I was with my mother and my grandsons at Herne Bay in a pub eating fish and chips just about when the game kicked off. So I caught up with it yesterday when I got back, and I really don't know what I think about the game is the honest answer to that. Because in normal times, when we hadn't had a week like last week, when we all got very ratty and complained like hell about the team, you'd be saying, well, it's a load of young players. We've got injuries up to our neck. We've got 6 players away with England. Any kind of point out of the game will be a bonus. And all we're really looking for is the youngsters to give a good performance. And all of that is true. But I don't know whether... I mean, as you said earlier, Jez, when we were talking about the women, we did see flashes of different, better attacking play being put together, but it still just seems a bit error-strewn to me.
Yeah, I kind of get where you're coming from. However, I can forgive errors if it comes off the back of players trying to do something. And I think, you know, they were trying to do, as I said about the women, inject some depth, inject some pace, and inject some incisiveness, in particular from inside centre. Someone that I know that you rate very highly, Duncan. I thought Ollie Hartley really had a very impressive game. He made yards every time he got his hands on the ball, and he made yards at quite a rate of knots. And, you know, I think when you look at the game, it was a game of ifs, buts, and maybes, and we'll perhaps get on to where you said there was a bit of a storm in Exeter. We were on the back end of a tempest, weren't we, Barry?
Yeah, I rewatched the game today when I got back, and we can't blame the referee for that, for the loss, but you do wonder sometimes. I've always wondered how he gets away with it, to be quite honest with you, and I'm sure both sides would look back at the highlights and say, there's things that you've missed, and there's some strange old decisions in there. But I think that the word of the day to sum up the men's performance for me was frustrating, because we spent 62 minutes getting ourselves into a great position to win that game, and then 10 minutes throwing it away.
Yeah, I think I agree with you there. I mean, a try where a foot was clearly in touch. How they never turned that over, I do not know. But I mean, perhaps that's my biased, cockeyed view of it. I definitely saw that foot hit the white, and that was enough evidence for me for that to be pulled back. The biggest concern I had with the refereeing, though, is the fact that let's talk about it. Juan Martin Gonzalez deserved a yellow. It was a yellow. I mean, if it'd been a penalty, I don't think anybody complains. He did lift the player, no matter what Sam said on our WhatsApp group. I think he was the only person who didn't see that. It was a yellow card. You can't get away from that. Harry Wilson, yeah, it was a high hit. My issue is, how many high hits did the refereeing team, and it's not just Tempest, it's the whole team, how many did they miss? There was one on Nathan Michelot, there was one on Phil Brantigan, and Capelli Pifatelli goes off with a head injury, which presumably came from a high hit as well. Not even looked at. Not even talked about. No, nobody said anything whatsoever. And that's what gets me, is the inconsistency when, we saw it, and in real time, it wasn't just me saying it. My wife sat there, the one on Nathan Michelot, she went, woof! Are they going to look at that? And I mean, she doesn't really know that much about rugby, but she spotted it in real time. So why didn't the TMO spot it?
Well, as I said, I was sitting in a pub, but occasionally I was looking at the WhatsApp and seeing all this steam coming out of your corner. So when I got round to watching the game, I was thinking, I'm going to see a really horrific refereeing performance here. And yes, with the foot in touch incident, there were some shots where it appeared to be in touch and some shots where it definitely didn't. And, when it's already been given on the pitch, it's got to be absolutely clear, no doubt about it. Sometimes that would be given as a foot in touch, and sometimes it isn't. And as for the other instance, that they happened. But like Wayne Barnes said, referees are instructed to ref the game quickly. If they don't see something, they don't see something. And those instances don't particularly stand out for me.
Purely because I watched it again today, I actually heard the question that he asked the TMO. And he phrased it in such a way that it had to be conclusive proof that it was
he did.
In touch. Now, I agree with Jez. His foot was almost certainly in touch, but there wasn't a conclusive angle on it, and that's why it was not overruled on the. It was one of those. If they'd ruled him in touch, they wouldn't have overturned that and given the try either. So it was just one of those where he actually phrased the question in such a way that the TMO had nowhere to go with it. It was interesting watching it back on telly today, and I didn't realise this at the game. Ian Tempest does a lot of. He lets his linesmen or assistant referees and the TMO do a lot of reffing for him. Obviously at international level, he is the TMO, so perhaps he's got a different outlook on it. But it was amazing how many things he didn't see and he had to be told about, particularly from Sarah Cox. Sarah Cox was constantly in his ear about offsides and high tackles and things, and he just seemed to not see an awful lot, and I don't personally get that. I felt with Sam a little bit on the Gonzalez thing, because there was no way he was trying to lift him and no way he was trying to throw him out of there. It was just a bit of a wrestle, and things escalated. Harry Wilson's red card, no arguments for me, and I'm gonna say it was a bit of a brain dead shot, to be honest with you. It was a stupid thing to do, and he had plenty of time to not do that. But interestingly, of course, head contact, high degree of danger. The player plays on. No HIA for him.
Yeah, but that's not the point. I mean, overall, I'm very much with you on your earlier comment because we were talking about how many players we've got missing, how many young players we've got in. Exeter, in a way, the reason why they are in where they are in the table is because all of their players are away all the time. Because they all went to Sale or France or somewhere else, all their top players, and they're playing a very young team. They didn't have Mr. Hot Green Paste on the wing. And for listeners who are not regulars, I haven't gone completely mad. And frustrating, I think, is the word. We were good enough to get in position. And then quite often, we talked about that Lottie Sharp try against Quins where she scythed through. Well, there's been a few times with Castra, Munster, where we concede those tries. And that's what seems to undo us a lot this season.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one. The one thing I just wanted to pick up again on the refereeing though as well, and this is something I'm really, really feel strongly about, and it's not just the refereeing team on this weekend. Exeter Chiefs are coached to enter rucks dangerously. Dangerous to the player entering the ruck, dangerous to the player through the ruck. And the problem I had was Ian Tempest at one point said to whoever was the skipper on the pitch, you need to watch what you're doing at ruck time because you're going through and you're not clearing out to the ball, you're clearing men out recklessly. And they continued to do it. And after he's had a word with them, nothing else was said. And Exeter Chiefs, the way they enter rucks, at some point in the future, they are going to store up a huge problems because they're going to injure a player, either one of their own players or an opposition player, badly through the way that they're doing. And the way that they enter rucks, we will see a law change because of the way that Exeter are coached to enter rucks.
Yeah. You see, Exeter nasty cheats, you see. Can't help it. Just getting a bit of our own back there. Yeah. I mean, where I totally agree with you is the attitude of the young players. They were like a breath of fresh air. And coming back to your comments about my grandson, as you call him, I like to see a big, bulky, solid bruiser of a 12 alongside a nippy 13. We used to have that with Brad Barrett, and I think we've got that with Ollie Hartley. And it's a better combination, him and Alex Lazowski, than Nick Tompkins and Alex Lazowski in my opinion. And it also has the further advantage of freeing Nick Tompkins up to play 7.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's remarkable. I mean, fair dues, he did very well when he came on. But talking about 7, I think the one lad that I think really does need to be lauded from that game, and I know the week before we talked about it, if you're going to not have Tom Willis and Ben Earl on the pitch, Toby Knight's injured, who seemingly is the next cab on the rank behind Ben Earl. Nathan Michelot, who's a young lad, came in, and I thought he had an immense game. Every moment he was on the pitch, he made carries, he made tackles, he disrupted rucks, he got himself in, he put his head in and body in places where you shouldn't be, and had an absolutely amazing game.
He gets better and better every week, doesn't he? And you just have to remember how young he is. He's not playing on Thursday, but I think he's still the captain of the under-20s, isn't he, for England? But if he isn't, it's just because he's a few days too old. He's going to be something. And yeah, we signed a Welsh back rower, Karen Tuipilote, this week on a short-term loan, and then played another Welshman in that position, which was very interesting. But the thing that I'm beginning to wonder about is we kick the ball more than any other team in the Premiership, and Ivan Van Zyl kicks it more than any other player in the Premiership. And I just wonder whether this is a good tactic, because what Exeter did brilliantly, and other teams are doing it to us, is that when we do a box kick, I don't know whether it's some of the changes in the laws, but there are 3 players that just lurk back on our side of where the ball is going to land in a sort of half moon shape, waiting for us to flip it back. So Brandon Jackson, for instance, who, as you know, had a great game, I thought, would often get to the ball, tip it back, and there'd be 3 extra players waiting to catch it. And I just wonder whether this tactic of kicking more than anybody else has been found out, Barry.
We've done it for years, on and off. I mean, Richard Wigglesworth was the box kick king, wasn't he? And I wonder if it's just been a little bit more. I wonder if it's kind of predictable that we're going to do it. We're going to go 2 phases and out if we're in our own half, and and even sometimes in the opposition half, if we're not going anywhere, we'll do it quite quickly. But you're right. I mean, I think we do kick from hand more than anyone else. Although on Saturday it was actually only 1 more than Exeter, because I've got the stats in front of me. But it's a little bit predictable, and I do sometimes wish we'd be a little bit more adventurous and try and go a little bit more. I mean, all the back 3 players I felt played superbly at the weekend. It's a shame we didn't get them more of the ball one way or another.
Yeah, which we're failing to do, which is a sign of us playing narrowly, Jez. And the other thing is, the reason when we do try and play expansively, leaving aside that static attack, which we've talked to death in previous weeks, that lack of accuracy usually finds us out when we try and play the ball through the hand.
Well, maybe so. I mean, I'll come back to your comment about the umbrella of Exeter Chiefs players having lazy runs back, as it were. The easy way to cope with that is to kick it slightly longer and to get and to not only go with one person going up for it. If you've got somebody who can get in underneath it and tap it back, you've got to make sure that you've got a back row there. And to be fair, a lot of the time, Juan Martin Gonzalez was getting there as well. And, at that point, if you start getting there and you've got that back row player there waiting for the tip down, then you're going to force the Chiefs or the defending players to get further back behind the ball, because so I can see why they're doing it, and I don't see it as being as negative as perhaps other people would do. But you're right, once you've created that broken play, that broken field, are we doing enough with that broken field? Now, a player I think we do need to mention, because it was his first proper start for us in a Saracen shirt at 10, young Louis Johnson. I thought he showed enough promise there to that, and in a lot of ways, his more consistent performance. I think his more consistent performance was better than some of Fergus Burke's less consistent performances, although perhaps not as good as Fergus Burke when he's been really, really good.
We saw that, didn't we? I mean, poor old Fergus Burke had that terrible bouncing ball which led to one of their tries. I mean, that's just unfortunate. I agree with you about Johnson, but when Fergus Burke came on, there were a couple of great breaks that he did, didn't he?
Yeah, I think that's the difference in him, is that he has got that little bit of pace. And, fair dues, we were talking about Amelia McDougall in the previous game. She's had 10, 15 starts for Saracens Women, so she's comfortable when she starts. That's Louis' first start, and I thought, to be fair, until he went off, we were leading. So, with a period of time when we went down the centre, his defence was very good. He made a couple of very big hits, some really good hits. There were a couple of times where he looked, he brought Ollie Hartley in at pace, and thank you very much. That's what we've been calling for. Also, there was times where he looked and said, "All right, there's a little dink over the top on," or try a longer kick pass, as it were, to the winger, and it worked. So there was a lot more variation, I thought, in this game, even if it didn't perhaps gel, which is understandable if it's your first game at 10.
Well, a few things are going to be interesting. When the league restarts in about 4 decades' time, are we going to see a Charlie Hodgson, Owen Farrell type situation with, them both playing the game? And they're going to use up one of the precious sub positions with that. And in this more than 2 month break, I think, are they going to be working hard on getting more accuracy in the back play? Let's hope so. Another aspect of the game that caught my eye was, and I go back again to that interview that I did with Joel Tompkins, because he talked about how, He came from an environment at Wigan where after a game, everybody had to stand up at the team meeting and go through their own mistakes and in a way berate themselves. And he came to an atmosphere at Saracens, which was complete and utter positivity. And do you remember that story you told about the first time he went in for a team meeting and there were 3 people playing the guitar and 4 people singing, and he thought it was a wind-up. Now, I bring that up because before the game, they asked Mark McCall about the Castra performance, and he said, well, we haven't talked much about that, which was in a way quite astonishing, but fits with that ethos, doesn't it? That especially as it was only half the team that played against Castra, and with those young players, they didn't want to dwell on it, which I found, both surprising and not surprising, Barry.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I'm sure Alex Osterbury's mentioned something similar about this before with the women's team. They don't focus on results. So what happened last week isn't particularly important. It's more that they're getting the systems right, and they're concentrating on what they can control, if you like, and how we play and the way that we want to play is more important than the fact that we shipped a try because of XYZ last week or whatever. So they don't kind of go backwards on that, and it's probably, well, it's definitely a different way of looking at it, and it's worked for us over the years. So who are we to complain about it? But yeah, if you take it in isolation like that, it's probably a hard thing to understand.
I'll add one thing before I bring you in, Jez, because on the Twitter, Nathan Mikaloff interviewed after the game. I said, what do you think about that? He said, I thought it was brilliant. It was great to play with all of my young mates, and we put in a really good performance. So unending positivity. So they're definitely sticking to their knitting, Jez.
Well, yeah, and I mean, it's an interesting thing. I think it's a subject I've brought up before, and bringing up the fact that I used to coach as well. There was a book, Total Rugby, by a guy called Jim Rutherford, which was 30 years ago, was the Bible by which you went by. And again, Winning by Clive Woodward, which is the story of how he developed the England team and business and everything like that. Top coaches will never throw the kitchen sink at players after a bad performance. They throw the kitchen sink at players after a good performance. And it's almost like saying, when it went wrong. There was no player who went on the pitch against Castra, for instance, thinking we're going to have a crap game here. It doesn't happen that way. It sometimes occurs that you do have a crap game. If you walk off that pitch and if you've got anything about you, and that's the same in any sport. If you're a sprinter and you've had a bad 100 metres, or if you're a cricketer and you've got out for naught, if you've played a bad shot. You don't need someone telling you, particularly when you're at the top of the sport, if you're a professional. But when you had a good game is the moment then that you highlight when mistakes have been made. And you say, it could have been a lot better. And that's what the real top coaches, and I bet Smalley does that. When they've had a really good performance, he'll come out and he'll say, but Alex Osterbury, again, when we put 100 points on in against Leicester, I bet he turned around after that game and was nitpicking on things where they could have got 120 points. But when they lost against Loughborough, I bet he just turned around and said, okay, line in the sands. We don't go there again, but where we're not going again. Do you understand?
I do understand that. But the question mark in my mind is, unless we're all completely wrong, and also at least 75% of the people online are wrong about our static defence, wouldn't they look at it and say, what's this all about? What do we got to change here? That's why you'd look at a bad performance and talk about it, wouldn't you, Barry?
The coaches will. The coaches will amongst themselves, Duncan, but not necessarily with the players. They will then work. What the coaches will do is they'll sit together and they'll say, right, okay, what went wrong here? What went wrong there? But they're not going to go for the players because I think it was an Owen Farrell thing where you talk about, if it's a skill error, is different to it being a commitment error or something along those lines.
Yeah.
And, so skill error, that's on the coaches. The coaches then will look at it and say, okay, what do we need to do on Tuesday morning when we get this group of lads together to make sure that doesn't happen again? And they'll concentrate on that particular skill or on that particular part of the game or that particular part of the pitch. What do we do better there? But they won't necessarily go to those players and say, that wasn't good enough. They'll go to them and say, this is what we need to do to be better.
Goodness me, Jez talking sense, Barry. What do you reckon to that?
I think I'm glad he beat me to the contractual mention of Owen Farrell for the week, because I was worried we might not get that in. But
nobody's measured his hit for Racing on the weekend either.
Oh, it's a beauty, wasn't it?
But I do want to just go back to one thing, and we're talking about players and players leading themselves, and that is something that we miss. And the difference between the men's side and the women's side is a character like Marley Packer, in my opinion.
Well, do you know, it occurred to me, because we talked last week about that we don't have an attack coach, and a number of people online said, well, what about Kevin Sorrell, who is the backs coach? So obviously there's an element of attack in that, but does that link up with the forwards, etc.? And I did wonder, to an extent, for years, did we perhaps not need one because we had an attack coach? It was just that he was playing on the pitch.
Yeah, and I mean, we talk about Alex Good. I think if Alex Good had been fit and had been playing, they might have been different. I do think Liam Williams has been such a good signing for us, in so much as that he gives an element of that. I think the biggest problem on the weekend was that you didn't really see that person who was going to be 100% vocal, and you would hope that it would be Ivan Van Zyl would be that person who would be 100% vocal. But you've got no Jamie George in the field, you've got no Maro Itoje on the field, you got, Nick Tompkins comes on gobby, but not necessarily in the right way. And that was the one thing I felt that was missing at the point in the time when suddenly, you're down to this, that, or the other, and Exeter got a couple of tries. There was nobody really there who was able to take the game by the scruff of the neck and just sort of like say, we need to shore this up. And that second try came because of that. We kind of went shell-shocked after the first try with the foot in touch. And they scored within seconds, didn't they?
Absolutely. Well, I think we've probably done that. I mean, summing it up, it comes down to a lot to be encouraged by and a lot to be frustrated by, which is, that's one better than the Castra game, isn't it?
Well, yeah, it is. But it's now, of course, the bigger frustration is we've got so long until we get a game in the Premiership. I'll be a year older by the time we run out against Quins at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium.
But, that's probably good in terms of the injury list we've got, and also hopefully some time to look at these performances and do that heads together amongst the coaches and start trying different things. It could be a good time. But yes, we're back to the Premiership Cup next week, and actually a peach of a fixture. Ealing is one of those fixtures where they've got a strong team, and our youngsters are going to get a really good test, aren't they, Jez?
Oh, undoubtedly so. And I think the Exeter game is a really good blooding for those. And in a way, it was good to have that game. I think what we need to remember, quickly, just going back to the main competition, as it were, we're in 5th place.
Yeah,
we're the team that has had kids going out there. I'm not sure whether we could expect much more, and we've said this throughout the season, than where we are in the mix for a playoff place. I think that's going to be a pretty successful season for this group of players. But
that's another thing that Mark McCall said. He actually said before the game, I don't really care what we get out of this game, because come what may, March will come around and we'll be in the mix. So it was almost as if he expected nothing.
Yeah, but as I say, I think what's really important is it's set these boys up, and another player I just wanted to mention as well, Max Eke, is it? I mean, he's got a short name that you can't pronounce it. But other than a couple of daft decisions that come from inexperience, which he will learn from, undoubtedly, he had a great game. So these players are going to come in, and you're going to see some youngsters coming through. I mean, presumably Harry Wilson's going to be suspended for a little period of time. And, so we're going to have another young second row coming in and whatever. There's every chance that I might be given a call to go and hook on the weekend, because I think we're down to one fit hooker, aren't we, in the club at the moment? So it's one of those things that it was good to get these guys blooded, I think, match ready.
There are a lot of parallels. Unfortunately. A bittersweet reason is that I forget his first name, but Olamide, Jack Bracken, who I'm a big fan of, and Angus Hall are away with the England under-20s. Samson Adajimi is injured, as you say, as hooker. So we'll see how strong the team is that we put out. But they're going to have a very good run out against Ealing and a very tough time, I think.
That's the other thing to mention, though, isn't it? I think, Duncan, Barry, because I've seen an awful lot of people quite rightly having a moan about the game on Saturday that we had 6 players out. You know, Exeter had Henry Slade out. If you want to grow the domestic game, you've got to make sure that the vast majority of the top players are playing in the Premiership games. And if there's only 18 games in the Premiership, they need to be playing in it. Now, I understand Matt will turn around and tell us that, you know, you play welfare, you've got to stand players down. But surely in a smaller league, you should be able to turn around and say that Maro Toji and Tom Willis don't play this game, but Ben Earl should, you know, they should be able to stand down one or 2 players, especially if you're putting together a 6th. You know, every team in a 35-man squad for England, you would expect 10 teams in England to be supplying 3.5 players. Well, we're supplying almost double that. So some sort of dispensation should be given to us for that. But it's incredulous to me. There's no other sport in the world that would ever turn around and say, right, this is a game that's going to be on TNT Sports, where we want to grow the domestic game because we want to get people watching the game and everything, that we'll allow a game to go ahead and so many players are sat on the sideline watching it or at the England training grounds and everything like that. It's incredulous to me. Football doesn't do it. They have international breaks and, you know, everything stops like 2-week period, and they play a lot more meaningless internationals that you get away with.
It's ridiculous on so many levels. I mean, you know, the whole reason for the 10-team league was that apparently we were going to have the stars for all the games, and the international periods were going to be distinct from that. But and I don't know if you've seen it. There's a petition going around to get this changed so that we can have the England players for all league matches. It's not going to get anywhere for one simple reason. Everybody, RFU, England, Premiership clubs are all in this together, and it's money. Because
absolutely.
The game at the moment is in such a dire strait financially that it needs all of those 80,000 people at Twickenham paying unbelievable prices to help fund the game. And then
80,000 people will pay that money to go.
Well, no, this is it. They won't. Because they started not to, because England was so crap in recent years, that we then get the RFU coming in saying to the Premiership clubs, well, we'll subsidise some of your salaries, like Maritoje, etc., if we can have more access to the players. So the Premiership clubs agree to it because they get some more money out of it. And England have asked for it as the international game gets bigger and bigger and bigger and more bloated, because they need England to keep performing to sell those tickets at Twickenham.
But it does. I mean, it amazes me that, because I mean, if you look at it, right, I mean, cricket's a prime example. The county cricket game. I mean, 4 people and a dog turn up for most county cricket matches, unless you're Surrey, you seem to be able to, you know, but that's a different story for a different podcast. But you know, Joe Root doesn't play for Yorkshire. He never, you know, he's on Yorkshire's books, but he never plays for Yorkshire. Ben Stokes never plays for Durham. You know,
this is the danger. This is the danger if they keep going this way, because it would be very easy to end up like cricket, or in a lesser way like Irish rugby, where you only see the top stars really for the European and knockout games. But cricket is the absolute epitome of the threat that could happen, where the club game is completely divorced from the international game, and the internationals occasionally turn up in these short-term things like the Indian Premier League. You know, it would be very easy to go that way. And we saw this year earlier somebody trying to start one of those competitions, creating franchises in cities of a roving club tournament. So it would be they have already gone too far that way, and it comes back to this overall discussion that we've had about how to structure the English game, and it's not been done well.
And you're right about the petition as well, Duncan. I don't know how you feel about it, Barry, but it will go nowhere, because I would be more confident of it being listened to if Helen Keller was the head of the RFU, not Bill Sweeney.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's an interesting interview with Bill Sweeney on another podcast that we won't mention, where basically he says that nothing's his fault because everything's run by committee, and to fix it, he's putting up another couple of committees. So I'm not really too sure where he's going with that one, but you're right, it won't change as long as the RFU are still supposedly in charge of rugby.
It's it's a mess. I mean, I've said before that the Premiership being run by the clubs themselves is just a recipe for You don't get Turkish voting for Christmas, do you, Jez? As
no, you say that every
and then the
time,
RFU is this melange between the amateur game and the England team. It's no way to organise a chip shop, let alone a professional game.
They make Mike Bassett, England manager, and the football look almost professional, don't they? And I mean, it's like, it's crazy how they do it. And, well, who knows? I mean, I honestly think people are more concerned about having a prawn sandwich and a few bottles of Chablis at Twickenham than they are about the game being successful. And until we get rid of them, as I say, it'll take a big wall and a lot of bullets, I think, metaphorically speaking, of course.
We shall see. We shall see if anything changes. Well, on that bright note, I think we'll call it a day. We've only called non-players. We've only said rude things about non-players this week, so we're perhaps getting back to our positive ways. Who knows? I still think we were right about the Bath game. I think we were still right about that. But there you go.
Yeah, and of course we've got the Six Nations to look forward to, haven't we, as well? So
yeah, absolutely. All right, gentlemen. Well, see you next week or not. We'll see who's up next week. It probably won't be me, but and they won't have. Oh no, they'll have Ealing to talk about. So that'll be interesting. So many thanks for listening in, everybody, and speak to you again, I hope.
Cheers all.
This is the Fezcast.